Off, I just want to offer a warm welcome to all of our chamber members that are here in the room, various representatives from small businesses across our community, and an even warmer welcome to Minister Bailey, Minister of Jobs, Economic Development, and Innovation for our province. Want to recognize that this afternoon, if you are joining from Abbotsford, as I am, we're gathered on the unceded traditional territory of the Stolo people, the people of the river who have inhabited this place for time immemorial, and pleased to be able to join, learn, and do business on this land. With that, our event today will be recorded, so other chamber members will have the opportunity to hear some of the Q&A and follow up if they're not able to join today. So with that, I want to thank you all again for being here and pass things along to Minister Bailey, who will be spotlit on your screens just to provide some opening remarks. And then we'll have a chance to engage, ask questions, and hopefully learn a little bit more about what's happening in the JEDI ministry, probably the coolest named ministry around. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Minister.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here with you. By way of introduction, I'll just share I'm the Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation for the province of British Columbia. I'm also the MLA for the area called Vancouver Falls Creek, which is really sort of downtown Vancouver, Yaletown, Granville Island, Science World, that sort of area. Prior to coming into politics in 2020, I spent 20 years in the tech sector as a serial entrepreneur. So my background is really in the private sector. I have degrees in social work and international relations and advanced studies in both business and law. So that's my background. It's lovely to get a chance to be with you, some of whom I've had the opportunity to meet before and some of whom I'm meeting for the first time now. I do also want to introduce my staff team who are here with me. I have Terry Harrison, who is my chief of staff over in Victoria, and I'm here with Claire. I always say your last name wrong, Claire Stetchison?
Yes.
Stetchison, yeah. I got it. Who's my EA and with me in the office here in Vancouver. And of course, we are, our part of the group is meeting on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations people. And, you say those names and move on, but I'd like to just say that there's so much wonderful work happening in collaboration with nations all across our province. And it's been really one of the most interesting and exciting part of my work in government and the work that this province is doing to really step forward and step into reconciliation, which includes economic reconciliation, which is so important. So as someone who's started my own businesses, not once but twice, I know firsthand the importance of having support to help you run your business and consider ways to expand and to grow. And I know that's the role that the Abbotsford Chamber of Commerce plays, supporting local businesses to become successful. Chambers of Commerce all over the province provide opportunities for networking and collaboration, and they're great resources for expertise in all aspects that it takes to start and run a business. My thanks go to the Abbotsford Chamber for doing this important work in your region, and congratulations on establishing the Fraser Valley Business Coalition. It's great to see a joint effort between the Greater Langley, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, and Mission Chambers of Commerce that'll help highlight and advocate for key issues important to the whole Fraser Valley region. I also want to thank the small businesses in attendance today. What you do, you might be a small business, but what you do is a big deal. Businesses like yours really are the backbone of the provincial economy. So what do we mean when we say that? You hear people say that all the time. What does that really mean? Well, small businesses account for 98% of all businesses in BC. It's extraordinary. In a province with 5.2 million people and more than 500,000 small businesses, that means close to 1 in 10 British Columbians are entrepreneurs of some kind. And to support our small business community, our government has been working diligently to create an economic environment that allows businesses to succeed. In 2017, we cut the small business corporate tax rate by 20%, giving BC the third lowest small business tax rate in the country. We supported small businesses through the peak of the pandemic, providing $530 million in direct grants to business owners. Important to note that we did not go loans like the federal government did. We went direct grants, non-repayable, and I think that's made a big difference. We know that there continue to be very significant challenges for small businesses and for people. And we've been addressing one of the biggest challenges we hear from businesses, which is the need for more skilled talent. Our Future Skills Grant provides funding for short-term training to help people get good jobs and help businesses expand and grow. Our childcare plan is also helping get more people into the labor market and to be able to remain working once they're there. Last year, 75% of people joining the workforce in BC were women. Affordable, accessible childcare has been absolutely key, and our government joined the chorus of business associations to ask for an extension of the federal CEBA loan payback program. As we know, extension was granted only for 1 year, but has, as a result, not granting it longer, it's added even more pressure to small businesses. And those pressures include continued global inflation, higher interest rates, slowing economy, affecting business owners and the people they employ. And that's why this year's budget includes financial support like the family benefit bonus, a one-time BC electricity affordability credit, and very importantly, and because businesses advocated so well for it, a doubling of the employer health tax exemption threshold. Although I would say that's not even properly worded. The tax threshold for EHT was $500,000. So if your payroll was up to $500,000, you wouldn't pay EHT. Over 500,000, you would. It's doubling to $1 million, but it's actually from $1 million to 1.5. It's graduated. So there's a better circumstance for everyone under 1.5 million in terms of what's required for the EHT. And what this change means is that this higher threshold leads to 90% of businesses in the province no longer having to pay that tax, which is really important for the well-being of small businesses. To foster new businesses, the Small Business Venture Capital Tax Credit provides tax credits for BC investors who make equity capital investments in BC startups. This helps businesses to gain access to early stage venture capital and provides a 30% tax credit, to BC resident investors to help offset some of the risk of investing. In 2023, this tax credit helped raise over $110 million in early stage funding for more than 220 small businesses. The credit catalyzed businesses around the province and will continue to do so well into the future. And since we've come into power in 2017, we've increased that tax credit 3 times. Our government continues to have conversations with the business sector, and we hear you on many challenges. Recently, we initiated the Securing Small Business Rebate Program that provides up to $2,000 to businesses to offset the costs of vandalism, such as fixing broken windows or cleaning graffiti. And the program also offers up to $1,000 for preventative measures, such as installing security cameras or improved lighting, better locks or gates. The goal here is to get money back into the pockets of hardworking small business owners who, to no fault of their own, have experienced vandalism, or who are trying proactively to protect their storefronts. If you haven't already, I encourage you to take a look at the program and see if you're eligible. We understand people and communities have been impacted by downturns in the forest sector as well. As our natural resource sector transitions, our government is helping build resilient communities by providing new opportunities that will create good, sustainable jobs for people throughout our province. One way that we're doing this is through the $180 million BC Manufacturing Jobs Fund. And through this fund, we're supporting high-value manufacturing projects that will help diversify local economies, promote made-in-BC products, and supply good-paying jobs for British Columbians. A few examples of local manufacturers that have been helped through the BC MJF are Dynamic Windows and Doors, as well as Tiger Tools International. Both of these Abbotsford-based manufacturing businesses receive funding that sees them embrace innovation, upgrading old equipment and improving processes while creating local jobs. And I want to mention it's not always just measured on how many new jobs you're creating. Some of the successful applicants to the BCMJF are applying because they want to protect the jobs that they have. In order to do so, they need more advanced technology or new equipment. So protecting jobs that would otherwise be lost is also part of this goal. Funds committed to date through the BCMJF will help create more than 1,100 jobs and protect nearly 2,000 existing manufacturing jobs throughout BC, with over 2,500 of them in the forest sector. So far, the province throughout the province, we've agreed to contribute over 91 million through the Manufacturing Jobs Fund, and the fund remains open for local manufacturers looking to grow their operations and grow or protect jobs. I want to assure you our government will continue to support people in British Columbia and support business. In my role as JEDI Minister, I'm proud to say BC has a diverse economy fueled by globally renowned entrepreneurs and businesses in every sector, including life sciences, clean energy, agri-tech, forestry, mining, advanced manufacturing, and technologies. In BC, we're making sure that we connect our climate goals to the investors and industries that share our low carbon vision. And we're looking for a partner to build their clean business. Earlier this spring, the Premier and I were in Abbotsford at Vitalis Nutrition, releasing our clean and competitive industrial blueprint. This blueprint lays out the province's work to drive new investment, create new jobs, and seize new opportunities in growing clean energy and sustainable industries across British Columbia. Our government has been following our blueprint and working collaboratively across all sectors to leverage BC's strengths and build a strong, sustainable economy that works for everyone. We'll continue to look for ways government can work with entrepreneurs and companies that have big dreams to provide innovative solutions for the challenges that people are facing today. I'm betting some of the folks doing this work are here online with us now. In closing, I'd like to thank you all for having the courage to build and maintain a business. I know firsthand it is not easy. You play a major role in supporting the province's economy, providing much needed services for your community and jobs for people. We know there's more work ahead, and we're listening. The small business sector is a significant force in our economy, and we will continue to support you. Together, we'll keep developing pathways to building a resilient economy that works for all people living in British Columbia. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those comments and just providing a little bit of that overview of some of the activities that that your government are working on to support small businesses. So we have about 45 minutes left together, and I'll kick things off with a few questions from the chamber side, but really want to prioritize making time for our business owners on the call to be able to pop on and ask you some questions directly. I already see there's folks from the aerospace sector, from retail. There's a good mix of people here, so I'm sure you'll get a wide range of questions. But just to kick things off, you know, and we've spoken about this before, but that concept of there being an affordability crisis for cost of living in this province, but also an affordability crisis for business owners who are trying to maintain operations and continuing to do what they do in an increasingly challenging business environment. So it was great to hear you speak to the EHT threshold increase. That was a huge one that I know that a lot of our local business community really valued. So was happy to hear you highlight that. And of course, disappointing that the CEBA loan extension did not come through from the federal side, but knowing that was something that was on, you know, the provincial priority list, especially following so much of the work that Chambers of Commerce had done across BC. That was something that we appreciated seeing. But I want to ask you generally, when it comes to that affordability issue, you know, we know some of these pieces are in play from the Securing Small Business Grant, which we will send around info to this group again as a reminder of, and can support businesses in applying for those. But what else might you have to say to business owners who are struggling right now with affordability and with cost of doing business? What else might be on the radar of government right now, and how can you encourage them to get through some of these challenging times?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, it is just a very challenging time right now, and there are some indicators that some of the pieces that are feeding that difficulty may be shifting. You know, we all cheered when we saw, even though it was 0.25 points, you know, the cost of borrowing money has been so high, and it's had really significant impacts, not only in terms of, you know, access to capital and the cost of carrying loans and carrying investment, but also the lack of investment coming into the community. You know, when investors can get good points from the bank and other ways, they don't take as much risk as making investments into businesses, and that's been a huge issue as well. So as we see efforts on controlling inflation starting to have impact, we do expect to see that borrowing rate continue to decrease. And of course, it's not something we have influence over directly. You've heard the Premier say he thinks that it's been too slow. And probably rightly so. The Bank of Canada is not influenced by politics. We understand that. But we really do want to see those numbers tick down because it has such a big impact in all things in regards to small businesses and large businesses, frankly. So that's a really important piece. But I think it's also really important to recognize that costs are not limited to the sort of traditional things we think of when we think of business, things like whatever it is that your input costs are in the product, for example, and the impact that that has. Costs are also, it's all very interconnected. For example, we pay a lot of attention in our government to the cost of housing. Housing costs have implications in every aspect of society, but also economy. Because when people are spending 50% or more of their income on housing, that is money they're not spending at your businesses. And we know that. We've taken many, many actions on housing, and we will continue to. British Columbia leads Canada right now in terms of housing starts, and that is going to have an impact on business, frankly. This is a very important piece. And we used to think of housing as separate from business, but I don't think we think that way anymore. And neither do we think of childcare as separate from business, because we know that childcare is an absolutely integral input to the economy. You saw that last year when 75% of people coming into the economy were women, while we're increasing our $10 a day childcare numbers significantly. So these are really important inputs. They might not sound like business inputs, but they are business inputs. So I think that work will continue. If we're elected again, you'll see us have even more measures in regards to trying to tackle the housing crisis, which really is a very, very important issue. You also see that there's a number of different supports for businesses that we're bringing forward, and we've had some really good discussions with many different business organizations, the BC Chamber Association, for example, as well as individual chambers, on what other pieces might be helpful to them. So there's much dialogue going on. And I really look forward to hearing from people today on the line on some of their thoughts about additional measures.
Thanks, Minister. It's great to hear you speak about housing because we saw such decisiveness with the Housing Supply Act. And of course, Abbotsford is one of those target communities that does need to build a large amount of new housing for the community. And so decisiveness around housing is something that's, of course, valuable for businesses. But there's always that question around the infrastructure that goes around new housing development. And recognizing that this isn't your ministry specifically, I wanted to invite the question just around infrastructure development overall, and some of the key things that our community specifically needs in order to meet the continued population growth that happens in our region. So again, we know that there's a need for more housing to house the people that are moving to our communities, but how do they get to and from their homes, to and from work? So needing to invest in that transit infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. We've talked a lot about Highway 1 and understand the commitments that have been made there. But also along infrastructure, some of the bigger investments into flood mitigation infrastructure that protects our community and an agricultural producing region. Want to understand, specific to Abbotsford, if you can speak to the connectivity between all of that new housing development that needs to occur and the investments that need to happen into infrastructure for Abbotsford.
Yeah, and I can't speak to Abbotsford specifically, but I can tell you, all across the province, there's need for additional infrastructure. That's the nature of growth. And this is not an easy problem. We saw 500,000 people move into the province in the last 5 to 6 years. And so we need labor force. We've heard from many, many people in the business sector that labor is one of the major inputs that folks are struggling with. The federal government has a very open policy towards immigration. We find that beneficial because it helps us address the challenge that we have in terms of needed labor. We do not grow enough British Columbians to address the labor challenge that we have in front of us. And so immigration is an absolutely important key to our continued growth. And with that, when people come to British Columbia, and many folks are within Canada and some folks from elsewhere, they don't bring a sewage system and a doctor with them, unfortunately. So we have a lot of kind of catch-up work that happens with that expansion. And quite frankly, we have not been making investments prior to 2017 in the way that we could have been, specifically in regards to housing. There's been a real, we've really fallen behind. So it's a game of catch-up in many ways. And I would argue that's true both in terms of education and hospitals as well. So there's a lot of work being done in all of those files all at the same time, which is why you see, building happen everywhere you go in British Columbia. And, there's a number of different approaches to take to this. It's tricky because each municipality has a different level of challenge in regards to infrastructure. When, for example, downtown Vancouver, a lot of folks who are coming into the province are landing in metro, very old infrastructure and high demands for changing that infrastructure in the billions of dollars. So you see very populated areas with really big price tags. How are they going to be able to afford it? Different challenge in smaller communities, we are also seeing a lot of growth. And, you've identified correctly that it's transportation, but there are many other things. It's infrastructure, water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, education, hospitals, all of that at the same time. And with a smaller tax base to draw on, it's even a bigger challenge than you see in the cities because there isn't enough money coming in to address all of those challenges, particularly in regards to water and sewage. So what the province has done really taken an innovative approach, which was we had $1 billion put aside for infrastructure, shared out to every municipality in the province, and no municipality got less than $100,000. And so, no, that's not true, less than $1 million, pardon me. And that was a really innovative approach because it wasn't based on just sort of population calculation. It was, you can't really do very much with a small amount of money, so it has to be a bigger amount of money. And I don't have offhand, I don't think the exact number that Abbotsford got, but I know it was a very significant amount of money put forward to their council for infrastructure investment. Of course, things like transportation aren't part of the expectation that municipalities address that. That's a provincial piece, and there's a lot of work going on in the Ministry of Transportation in regards to what it looks like for the Fraser Valley because it's attracted so many people. It's an area of really strong growth, and so also an area that we have to prioritize in regards to transportation, hospitals, and schools.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up our strong agricultural sector in Abbotsford. We know that there's about $3.8 billion in annual economic activity from the ag sector alone in Abbotsford alone, and with that, we had the Fraser Valley Economic Summit just a month ago now, and one of our speakers very aptly put it, agriculture is an innovation industry. Farmers are finding unique ways to increase yield, to find efficiencies, to address broader challenges around labor accessibility through technology. And so there's enormous opportunity in Abbotsford specifically for an ag tech supercluster, as we like to talk about. And so wanted to ask you, where do you see where do you see that opportunity for ag tech growing in the Fraser Valley? How do you see government being able to support that? And what do you think are some of the ways that we can continue to move that sector forward for local job creation?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's been an area of focus for us. We've been quite bullish on agri-tech in British Columbia really since we were elected. And I know the minister prior to me, Minister Kalon, has traveled quite a lot to learn about what other jurisdictions are doing with agri-tech and really led the drive for us to make some changes in policy to ensure that things like vertical farming are possible, but also to stand up the Stronger BC Economic Plan. Underneath it is the BC Centre for Agri-Tech Innovation. And we've invested in that particular centre. And it's really quite an excellent tool available for folks that are working in the agri-tech sector. And the way that they work is there's quite a high degree of expertise. And there are also entrepreneurs in residence who are able to mentor companies that are either creating agritech or bringing agritech into their business practices. So it's quite a useful partner in regards to companies that are doing that work. But you're absolutely correct. Everything I'm seeing, I don't own the agriculture file, obviously, but I do have the tech file. And I've seen so many innovative businesses come up with really quite extraordinary solutions that are being applied right now in many, many types of agriculture throughout the province. And of course, there's such a concentration in the Fraser Valley and around Abbotsford. So it's a very, very exciting time right now for farming and agritech. And it's interesting. I went to a major conference on agritech down in California last year, and it was just fascinating to learn the stories that we were hearing, because I met some older farmers who were working with younger farming folks, and the stories that we were hearing is, that story, like, what are we going to do with the family farm, and we're going to have to sell the farm, the kids aren't interested in it. That story is changing, according to the folks that I met, because young people love technology and they love innovation, and they bring really amazing ideas and new eyes and new lenses into old problems. And because of this change that's happening in agritech, young people are being drawn into agriculture in a way that wasn't happening in the last decade. So it's a really exciting opportunity. And it's because of the sort of glossy, cool, amazing technology that people are bringing into their practices that is really attracting young people to come back into agriculture, which is so great. It's such a good news story for everyone. So we're definitely seeing and supporting that as well. I'll share that in January, we announced through the BC Centre for Agritech Innovation supporting 13 new agritech projects, and that represents a total investment of over $2 million, including $658,000 in support for a Centre of Agritech matched 538 for generating 76 jobs for people in the province working in agritech. So that's just sort of an example of one of the pieces that we've done through investments. But there's a number of different investments that have been made. I think one of the notes that we have here is that there's a project that aims to adapt outdoor plants varieties for greenhouse conditions and to develop optimized cultivation techniques for their intensive year-round production, leading to more BC grown food, which of course is an important goal. And that, included 16 new jobs in Abbotsford. So small projects, but, these all add up over time to grow additional jobs. And you'll hear us talk a lot when we talk about agritech, the importance of securing local food chain and made in BC really needs to be an additional priority. Food security is going to be a growing, no pun intended, issue in the future, because we've seen indications during drought and climate change in California. There was some talk about closing borders to export. We've also seen basmati rice in India close for export for some time. So there's a lot of concern about what it looks like for food security in this time of climate change and increasing risk to farming. So the priorities aren't just about economic development, which of course are very, very important. It's also very much about food security, which is a huge priority for our province.
Absolutely. Food security is critical. And when you think about Abbotsford and just that being the Abbotsford representing some of the highest gross farm receipts in the country, we can't prioritize this area enough. Now there's been enough of me talking, so I think it's important to jump to our attendees for some questions. And so on our end, Natalie on the chamber team is going to take questions as they come in. So would ask that you raise your hand, and when it's your turn to pose a question, you'll be able to be spotlit on screen to ask your question directly to the minister. So hopefully that's given enough preamble time for people to start thinking about putting up their hands. So we'll open it up and welcome the first question. And I'm going to spotlight that it's Kim Dominga first. And Kim, over to you.
Oh, hello, Minister Bailey. Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us here. I really do appreciate that. One of the questions I had, of course, is in our sector, we're experiencing, we're not a huge industry in Canada thus far, but we're quite a high value industry in aerospace. And my question specifically was around skills development. Would the NDP government consider following or adopting models from other countries? So, for example, our company originates in the UK, which worked very hard to address their labor shortage early on. And the scheme they have there is 2% of business taxes get funneled to an apprenticeship fund so that businesses can pay for the tuition of their apprentices. Today, here in British Columbia, often young people are not working for an organization that covers that cost. And it can be quite expensive. And I'll just use my family friend as an example. He's a power line apprentice and he is in school right now. He's in an education block of 4 weeks. He doesn't get paid. He's responsible to pay the tuition. And then later on, he gets 10% back for the first 2 years, then 15%, and then 20%. But it is a struggle for him to cover all of those costs and not have income, because the next education block is 8 weeks long, and he'll go 4 weeks or 8 weeks without any sort of income. So just, it doesn't have to be the 2%, but something like that helps both the businesses acquire new talent and helps people get into the trades.
So, Kim, I didn't hear where you were from and what you do. Sorry. Are you with Marshall's?
Aerospace industry.
What's the company?
Marshall Aerospace.
You're with Marshall. I wonder if you're with Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Nice to meet you. Yeah. So a couple things I'd say about that is, aerospace is such a promising sector for British Columbia, and almost not by chance, but of its own initiative to some degree, because federally, the priority around aerospace has been very focused on Quebec, very, very focused on Quebec, and the funding has been very focused on Quebec. We're quite interested in trying to pull some of that money across the Rockies if we can. We're seeing really interesting things happen in the aerospace sector in British Columbia. And certainly there's discussion about should we be fortunate enough to have another mandate. Working on the aerospace strategy is something that we're certainly considering. There's just so much occurring in the aerospace sector. We're seeing quite a lot of expansion in Kelowna, for example. There's some major projects that are coming up in that space, with Viking taking over all the de Havilland IP and building out in Victoria. We're seeing growth there. And of course, Marshall, a very welcome addition to what's happening with, supporting the Hercules aircrafts and all of the refit work and everything else. We've been very successful with the upkeep of planes more than necessarily the building out of planes from scratch, but we think that there's potential for that also to change. So all of that to say, yes, there's opportunity to do more in aerospace. And I think that the example that you've given about the 2% is really worth thinking on. The approach that we've taken is a little bit different, which is to really invest heavily on this Future Skills Initiative. And the Future Skills Plan, and this is a massive chunk of money, $482 million in the 2022 budget over 3 years going forward. And there's quite a lot of funding there for different sectors to receive some support on developing micro-credentialing as well. So I'll give you an example. I come from the video game and animation and visual effects sector. We worked closely with the sector and with the Ministry of Advanced Education to develop micro-credentials, which then could be recognized industry-wide. And when they're industry-designed micro-credentials, they're very prescient, they're very tight. There's no wasted time. They're designed for folks to be able to keep working while they do the micro-credential. And then the way that we've paired it is those micro-credentials, they're about $3,500 each. There's a BC Access grant that people can apply to for $3,500 to be able to take the micro-credentials. And it's an interesting model because the way that you can structure it is you can do one after another. So folks are able to, keep up their expertise within sector, but do a micro-credential to kind of bump up to the next level, and then later on do another micro-credential to bump up. So I think there's some opportunity there within the structure of the Future Skills Initiative to look at what it can look like for aviation. I do know that there is a demand for roles that are much more than micro-credentials can address. We need more aviation mechanics. We need, I hear it everywhere I go in aviation, what the needs are. And so certainly it is registering, and that information is flowing over to the Ministry of Advanced Education, because it is a critical need in the province for sure.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to jump in because we had a question from the Fraser Valley Child Development Center, Melissa Pettit, who just had to step off momentarily. So I'll ask the question for her, and she can tune back in for your answer, Minister. So she had asked, how is the government addressing the pressing need for speech language pathologists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, given the current shortage? Are there plans in place or under consideration to facilitate faster immigration of healthcare specialists to bridge the gap and bolster the talent pool in these types of critical professions? So we'll leave that to you, and you may not have the specifics to answer that one, but
yeah, I mean, I have a very broad range under economy, but that's a very specific question. So what we would do with that is follow up with her. And there's some really excellent work being done on credentialing. I would say we have a parliamentary secretary specifically working on that issue, a gentleman named Ravi Parmar, who's an MLA on Vancouver Island. And we've really come to the recognition that speeding up credentialing and prioritizing which credentials we want to invite into the province is a priority. And the work going on there is very, very significant, specifically in relation to healthcare, but I don't have specifics on the categories that she identified. So probably the thing to do, I'm looking at my colleagues, Terry and Claire, or get the contact information of Parliamentary Secretary Parmar over to the person who asked the question.
absolutely. Hey, this is always the joy when a staff team is able to also be on the call and help connect dots. So that's greatly appreciated. I'm not seeing a ton of hands coming up, so we did have a few more questions that were submitted beforehand. So I'll read this next one from Mr. Cole Distributing Company Ltd. Are there any resources or help from government to help the succession of small business owners who wish to retire but are struggling with how to hand off and sell their business? Is there anything that you might point to there?
Yeah, this is a really interesting issue that is presenting in many different ways across the province. And we see some businesses closing, and sometimes it's in relation to the challenging economic business environment, and sometimes it's just the aging demographic. We've got a shape of a mushroom cloud in terms of what our demographics look like. And there's so many people of retirement age that some businesses are going to close for that result. It's an incredible opportunity right now in terms of folks who would like to buy a business rather than start a business. Because there's so many businesses that are facing this challenge. There's also some great work that's being done to help business owners to look at what their transition options are. And I know that there's some great work going on at Small Business BC, which is an organization that we fund here in the province. So that's a great organization to connect up with. And I've also heard that some chambers are doing some really good work on this in terms of even some clustering of looking at whether there's an opportunity for businesses to come together and have a liquidity event of a number of businesses that have pulled together. So much really interesting thoughts going into this, because it's a very significant issue, and it's happening relatively quickly. We've all known for a long time that this demographic change is, coming. But it seemed to surprise us because it happened right sort of at and after COVID, and COVID sort of took us away to a different way of thinking, and we sort of lost the plot on what's happening in terms of our aging demographics. And you see it affecting so many things from healthcare and also, what's happening in small business ownership. So it's an interesting time for sure. It's also a real opportunity, though, because there's many mature and thriving small businesses that other people can jump in and run and apply new light to. And I think, to me, I think about the work of folks that are training young people in entrepreneurship and business acumen. I think that's a really important contribution because of the opportunities that lie in front of them right now. Usually when people, are interested in business and graduate, they're starting their own businesses. But right now, I would make any recommendation to young people to be looking at what businesses are available for acquisition.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great invitation for our next generation to be thinking about. No, Bill, I know you're on the call, so if you wanted to do a follow-up or had any other questions, just put your hand up. But with that, of course, Minister, I'm glad you spotlit the work that chambers do around succession planning. And so we do, for those interested in that, we do provide different workshops and some resources and training in that area. So just reach out to our team and we can always help connect the dots with that as well. I'll go to another question that was submitted virtually and invite others to raise their hands as questions arise. But one of the questions that came in, and I'll read it here, is it sounds like someone who might have been at the Fraser Valley Economic Summit, but it was a question around private sector job growth continues to fall behind public sector job growth. How is government addressing that pressing challenge to ensure that our economy is continuing to grow? I'll leave that.
Yeah, this is an area that I spend quite a lot of time working on. The good news is I'll point out that our public sector growth just last month led the country. Sorry, private sector growth led the country. And that was very exciting for us to see. It's every month I get the labor force survey results from Stats Canada and BC Stats, and we're always looking at what the breakdown is for private sector and public sector. A couple things I want to say about this. First of all, not all public sector growth is bad, right? A lot of people hear public sector growth and they think bloated bureaucracy. But I want to be careful with that because public sector growth also means growth in healthcare. It also means growth in teachers. It also means growth in firefighters. So we have to be careful with the assumptions that we make about public sector growth. If you want to get really specific and look at what areas public sector growth is happening in, then you have a more subtle conversation because, if you want to argue against, do we need middle managers, make that argument. But there's a real different approach between the BC NDP and other organizations, other political parties in regards to public sector. So I'll give you an example. When the BC Liberals were in power, they made the decision to lay off all of the folks that were doing in the healthcare sector, that were doing food services, cleaning services, all things of that nature. Those people had been working in union jobs. My grandmother was one of them in Nanaimo. She scrubbed floors in the emergency room. She had a hunch on her back from scrubbing floors in the emergency room. This woman worked her buns off. But she had a union job and she had a little apartment, a little car, and she could live a nice little quiet life. All those folks were laid off and it was privatized. And in privatizing it, those people were rehired if they wanted the job at minimum wage. Now, so bad, too bad, so sad, you could say that, but it had an impact on the quality that was provided in those hospitals. People felt that impact. Now, we made the decision to repatriate, it was 14,000 people. We repatriated them. So yes, you see growth in public sector jobs, but I will argue to the day I die that that was the right decision. And it makes a difference in the quality of care people have in hospitals. Because, the difference is the company that's privatized was taking away all of that money that was going into these people having quality lives. So I'm a believer in that personally. So leaving aside politics, we really want to see private sector growth. Private sector growth is really important. I don't want to see it exploitative, but I do support private sector growth. I come from the private sector. We're doing a lot of things to help that happen. So for example, our Manufacturing Jobs Fund, this is a fund that supports businesses. This money goes directly to businesses to expand their manufacturing footprint in British Columbia. Why do we do that? Why would we take public dollars and give them to a private company? We do it to reduce their risk in making a decision to expand in British Columbia. They can choose to expand wherever they want. They could go to Alberta. We don't want them to. We want them to expand here to build quality jobs. And that's why we make investments into places like Vitalis in Abbotsford or, Punjab Foods in Surrey that's making very high quality food products. In fact, if you fly on Air Emirates, for example, you're served Punjabi food products on that, world-class airline. We've got a lot to be proud of there. They wanted to expand. They didn't have the funding. We funded them at $7.6 million to help them expand. So there are investments that are specific to the private sector companies to help them grow. Manufacturing Jobs Fund is quite a flexible fund. About half of it is geared towards forestry companies that are looking to retool, put more technology in, build out mass timber, do value add. That's very important. British Columbia has long been, I mean, my dad worked in the forestry sector, right? He was in logging and grew up in the Nanaimo. We have long been exporting raw logs. That's just dumb. It not only are we selling it at its least valuable moment because we've added no value, we're also giving away all of those jobs to other jurisdictions. We don't want to do that. We want to see the private sector build out value add in British Columbia, creating high quality jobs for people to live and have successful lives here. The Manufacturing Jobs Fund helps us do that. Lots of other ways we're supporting private sector. I'll share with you, for example, I come from the tech sector. Our tech sector is extraordinary. There's great tech companies in Abbotsford. There's tech all over British Columbia, but we haven't really been able to draw the level of investment that we should for the quality and size of our tech sector. That's about investment climate. That's about being a small province. That's about us not advertising what we do. There's a whole bunch of factors that go into that. But what we've been able to do recently, just last week, is secure the largest tech conference in the world to happen in British Columbia next May. We've secured that for 3 years. And we know that this conference, when it ran in Toronto, there were 2,000 deals signed in 3 years. So us attracting this level of conference to shine a light on our tech sector and attract investors to come in and see what's happening in British Columbia, which is so much, is an example of how we can just put our finger on the scale a little bit to help the private sector grow. A lot more that we do in private sector, but it's absolutely integral. But I do just want to also say, Easy does it on the public sector bash because there's some very, very important public sector jobs that we really do want to see grow as well. Teachers and doctors and nurses, for example. We have grown the number of nurses in our province by 3,600 people last year alone. We're growing out the number of doctors. We know that we need more primary care physicians, 700 last year alone. Those are all public sector jobs, right? So we need both.
When we talk about jobs of the future and our skilled workforce, one of the questions that came in, which I know we've spoken about in the past, is about local post-secondary institutions. And so the question here is, knowing that education is not your portfolio, but talking about skills training is, where is the level of priority for looking at investing in more student seats for the Fraser Valley region? And I'm going to assume that that's related to UFE, but we'll leave that to you to answer.
Yeah, and I don't have the specific for the Fraser Valley region, but I can tell you that there's some major investments that are going on right now in regards to training, and the Future Skills Initiative program, the $483 million that we have invested, is really expanding across many, many areas. One of the areas that we have just put a very, very strong focus on is trades training. When I was growing up, my dad was in the trades, and I remember being told, you do not go into the trades. My brother was told not to go into the trades. You got to go to university and study history or, political science, whatever it is. We really did quite a disservice to young people of my generation and the generation that came up after me as well, because trades training is so important and the opportunity of trades is amazing. And also, of course, so many tradespeople are entrepreneurs. You can have very, very exciting and interesting careers in trades today. So we're really working hard to make some corrections there. And you'll see that we've invested in BCIT, developing out the Trades and Technology Center, which is going to graduate 1,200 people a year. Is that number correct? Is it 1,200 or 12,000? Terry, you want to look that up for me? I think it might be 12,000. It's 12,000. It's Claire just jumped in. It's 12,000, not 1,200, 12,000 people a year. So that's really, really important. But, to your point about the university in the Fraser Valley specifically, I don't have a number for you in regards to expansion, but I know that priority is really, really being focused on skills expansion. We've got multiple different ways to approach the need for labor. It's about attracting people into market from Canada. It's about attracting folks internationally into market. And it's about ensuring that every British Columbian has the opportunity to skill up significantly. We've got more people in apprenticeships right now than we have in the history of British Columbia. So we've reintroduced Red Seal into the apprenticeship program for many, many programs, which makes it even more appealing because Red Seal provides the ability to know that you get very trusted, well-trained people and they get paid higher. So more people are interested in the apprenticeship programs because the Red Seal has been introduced. So there's a lot of work going on across the board in regards to upskilling, retraining, new training, Red Seal training, apprenticeship, and also trying to address the challenge of it can be very expensive to be an apprentice. So there's work going on to look at that because, you know, especially for apprenticeships that require buying tools, we now have some scholarships available to support students that have to have that aspect as well. So really being looked at across the board.
That's great. You know, one of the things that has come up is that conversation about having a Guelph of the West. And so that would be something that would be terrific for British Columbia. And of course, I'll be completely biased on that, but I think its natural home should be in the Fraser Valley. So
I have another, you got a good argument there.
I have another question that came in anonymously. So perhaps this person is on the call and can hear your answer. But the question was around how do we keep our next generation in British Columbia? We hear about so many people leaving the province for other jurisdictions and for higher paying job opportunities. How do we ensure that they don't leave?
Well, we're going to put a date. No, I'm just kidding. You know, it's interesting. People have always come and gone in Canada. It's a constitutionally protected right that people can work any province in British Columbia. There's always been ebbs and flows for sure. And I hear people saying 70,000 people have left and, well, 60,000 people have come in from across Canada. So the net loss is 10, but we've also attracted more people internationally than we ever have before. So it's a complex and ongoing exchange of people that occurs. It's also true that people who work on major projects, for example, the major pipeline is just completed. Folks from all over North America worked on that project and beyond. And when that project ended, then people left and are working on a project in Alberta. So those numbers get skewed a little bit as people move to major projects. It can be a 5,000 or 10,000 person skew. Having said that, there's no question that the cost of living in British Columbia is having an impact on young people, disproportionately so. And that's the reason that we have to have such a precise focus on housing. You know, how can, I am the mother of 3 young people, 33, 30, and 27. And the biggest concern for them, as it is for me as their mother, is how can they afford to live and work in British Columbia? That's the work that's ahead of us. And it's so important, the inputs that we're doing into housing. So for example, Airbnb. First of all, Airbnbs are still allowed. People are saying we've banned all Airbnbs. It's not accurate. We have banned Airbnbs that are not your primary residence. You can still have an Airbnb in your primary residence. But it's worth noting that there was research that came out of McGill that showed that the rent in Vancouver increased by 30% because of Airbnbs taking stock out of the market. 30%. That's really significant. So for us to make the changes that we've made in Airbnb, you know, it's true. I've had a woman come in and scream at me because she owns 30 condos and I'm ruining her life. But frankly, 30 condos being Airbnb'd are now being released into the market for people to be able to rent. And it's interesting, and this is anecdotal, but I've heard that since we brought in Airbnb in the market that I live in, numbers are dropping a little bit on the cost of rent. People are saying, you know, I was looking at a place and it went down $200. I haven't seen that in 10 years kind of thing. So I hope that we'll see those, the data support that, but anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing, that we're starting to have a bit of an impact on housing. Same thing on the speculation and vacancy tax. Nobody loves taxes, but we're doing it because it's a precise effort to really curb what's happening in the housing sector. We need housing available for people to live in. It's not, you know, a game of Monopoly. We want people to be able to live in housing and work in British Columbia and have good lives and be able to spend money at small businesses. And so we're really throwing just so much at the housing challenge. So that's a big part of it. Also having high-paying quality jobs, right? And that's why we're making investments into multiple sectors to help businesses succeed and grow. You see us doing that in the manufacturing sector. We've prioritized particular sectors where we're making government investments because we know they grow well-paying jobs. And when people are paid well, young people are paid well, they have the opportunity to stay and build their lives in British Columbia. So that's work that we're doing. And it's, it's not easy, right? Because when you think about it, we want people to be paid well so that they can live in British Columbia and have good lives. Also, whenever we increase the minimum wage, it's difficult for small businesses who rely on minimum wage workers. And so, every decision has a knockoff effect. And so what we've been trying to do is structure it in a way that's predictable, that businesses can see what's coming. And that's important, I think. We currently we're tied for the highest average wage in Canada so I think it's 35.58 if memory serves correctly. And that's both good news and bad news, right? Depending where you sit on that. So these are complex issues, but we're working on them. And I think housing is absolutely critical to ensuring that people can stay in British Columbia.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, we are reaching the end of our time. I just want to invite any others on the call. Possibly could have room for one more very, very quick one, but I'm not seeing hands raised. So I think at this point, it would make sense just to move into some closing remarks. So perhaps, Minister, if you have any last comments that you would like to say to this group, for those that are online now and who will tune in later, we'll hand that over to you and then wrap up.
Alex. Just want to thank everybody for being here today. It's really great to get a chance to speak with you directly. I do want to take 1 minute just to highlight some of the work we've done on the Securing Small Businesses grant. I'll share you a story with you. When we rolled out this grant, we didn't get it right. And we know that. We rolled it out just around Christmas time last year. The pickup was quite slow. And I thought, it's Christmas. Everybody's really busy. Pickup isn't happening. And then we started to hear from businesses, you have made this too difficult for us to use. And I really want to congratulate my team who listened very carefully to that. And we revamped it in conjunction with the businesses who had reached out to us and in conjunction with the chambers so that it is much easier to use. It used to be you had to have the actual filing from a police report. Now you just have to have a file number. You can get that by a quick phone call. It used to be you had to show that you had applied for your insurance. Don't need to do that. Just need to show us that you have insurance. You don't have to apply to it. So we've made it much, much easier to use, and we really want to get that money out the door. It's lousy when anybody is affected by vandalism or a glass break or, something that happens to your storefront. Please use the program and tell other people about it. We stood it up in order to support small businesses. And I know that folks are saying, it's really hard to use. It's changed. Please use it if you need to. And I just really wanted to thank you, Alex, for setting this meeting up for us. There's a number of, significant challenges as we see the Fraser Valley continue to grow. It's just such an integral area to our province for food security, for so many other areas as well. For example, aviation. And we really know that. I met just last week on Thursday with a major company out of the US that is looking to grow their footprint and build out a huge facility. And the place we recommended to them is Abbotsford, right? We went on tour with them to Abbotsford. We see the opportunities there, and we hope to continue to provide chances for growth and also make sure that you have the infrastructure to do that growth. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us together, but really nice to get some time with you all today. Thanks very much.
Once again, appreciate your time and your team's time in taking the chance to connect with our members and local businesses. Another mention when it comes to the Securing Small Business Grant Program, for those of you on the call that are wanting to access those funds and have questions, just know our team is here to help support if you're putting an application forward as well. This is a program where you can access some of those funds, whether that's for reparative or preventative, and would encourage people to take advantage of that. We will send out a follow-up note with some of the programs that the minister outlined and some of the opportunities that are available. But a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in. And once again, thank you to Minister Bailey and her team for joining us. Wishing you all a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you at our next event in person.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.